It began as a whisper across the Pacific, a distant swirl of clouds gathering strength over waters warmer than they should be. By the morning of October 19, 2025, that whisper had become a roar. Super Typhoon Ramil, a monster storm the size of Arizona, made landfall in northern Luzon, unleashing winds that screamed past 180 miles per hour and waves that devoured the coastline. In minutes, neighborhoods vanished under walls of water. Lights went out. Silence fell. To the people of the Philippines, it wasn't just another storm. It was survival against nature's fury. Across the Pacific, meteorologists watched satellite feeds in disbelief as Ramil's eye tightened, glowing like a wound in the atmosphere. This was not a storm born overnight. It was the consequence of years of rising heat, shifting oceans, and a planet crying out for balance. In that moment, northern Luzon was cut off from the world. No news, no power, no way out, only wind water and willpower. By mid-morning, Super Typhoon Ramil slammed into the northern Philippines like a hammer striking glass. Winds howled at 180 miles per hour, shredding power lines and sending sheets of corrugated metal flying through the air like shrapnel. The sea, once calm and blue, turned black, surging inland with waves over 10 feet high, swallowing coastal towns whole. In the city of Apari, entire streets vanished beneath rushing water. Concrete walls cracked, trees snapped, and the air itself seemed to vibrate under the storm's fury. Communication towers bent and collapsed, severing contact with the outside world. What followed was a terrifying quiet, the kind that comes only when everything familiar has been torn away. People huddled in darkness, their homes shaking their prayers, drowned out by the unending roar. For 6 straight hours the storm did not rest. Then, as suddenly as it came, the eye passed an eerie calm, a fragile pause before the second half of the storm struck. It howled like a freight train and roared like the ocean itself, an unending assault of wind and water. And when it finally passed, silence fell again, heavy, hollow, and full of the realization that nothing would ever look the same. When Super Typhoon Ramil tore across northern Luzon, the storm didn't just destroy it, erased. Power grids collapsed, plunging towns into absolute darkness. Over 100,000 people were trapped in homes now half submerged. Winds exceeding 180 miles per hour ripped off rooftops and turned street signs into airborne blades. In Apari, families scrambled to the upper floors as 10-foot surges swept through living rooms. The water carried everything, furniture, vehicles, even entire market stalls, out to sea. Across the region, the only light came from flashes of lightning revealing what the storm had taken. Emergency crews pressed forward through floodwater that reached their chests, guided only by handheld radios. Volunteers formed human chains to move the elderly and children to higher ground. Inside crowded shelters, the air was thick with heat and fear. Mothers whispered prayers over the pounding of the rain. For nearly 12 hours, Ramil showed no mercy.
Namin po umpisahan paglinis after ng bagyo.
Climate scientists say storms like Ramil are part of a growing pattern where warmer oceans act as jet fuel, supercharging tropical cyclones into something far more dangerous. The science is clear: the line between a storm and a catastrophe is shrinking, and the planet's oceans are quietly tipping the balance. Long before Super Typhoon Ramil made landfall, scientists had seen the warning signs brewing over the Pacific. Ocean temperatures had climbed to nearly 80 degrees, turning the sea into an enormous engine of heat and moisture. From this invisible energy, Ramil was born, spinning faster, tighter, stronger with every passing hour. Dr. Lin Wei, a meteorologist from the Philippine Atmospheric Institute, explained, "The ocean gave this storm everything it needed: warm water, humid air, and time. It's a perfect recipe for destruction." Satellites revealed a storm so symmetrical it looked unreal, a 40-mile wide eye surrounded by walls of thunderclouds rising 6 miles into the atmosphere. In just 24 hours, Ramil exploded from a moderate Category 2 into a Category 5 monster, a phenomenon known as rapid intensification. Meteorologists across the Pacific sounded alarms as Ramil's winds neared 185 miles per hour, rivaling some of the strongest typhoons ever recorded. But this wasn't random. When the winds finally eased, people emerged from shelters barefoot and speechless, staring at streets that no longer existed. For some, survival felt like a miracle. For others, it was proof of something deeper, that in the face of unimaginable force, the strongest thing left standing is the human will to endure. As Super Typhoon Ramil ravaged the north, stories of courage began to surface, small acts of defiance against overwhelming odds. In Roxas City, families climbed to their rooftops as floodwaters rose to their windows. Children were lifted into plastic tubs and pushed towards safety through torrents that looked more like rivers than streets. At one shelter in a pari, more than 400 evacuees packed into a single school gym. Volunteers served rice and water by flashlight as rain hammered the roof above. Outside, the storm raged with winds strong enough to bend steel. "We held hands and prayed," one mother said. "It was all we could do." Rescue teams pushed forward through the night. 200 responders, 15 rescue boats, and 5 helicopters deployed across the flooded plains. Soldiers carried the elderly on their backs. Neighbors formed human chains, refusing to let anyone be left behind. Overseas, Filipino communities in the U.S. organized fundraisers within hours of seeing the first footage. By dawn, hundreds of survivors had been pulled from flooded homes. The storm had tested the country's strength, but it also revealed something unbreakable, a spirit of solidarity that no wind could destroy. Amid ruin, the Philippines stood tall, bruised, but never bowed. When the winds of Super Typhoon Ramil finally eased, the race to save lives began. Within hours, the Philippine government activated its full disaster response network. More than 300 first responders, 40 rescue vehicles, 20 boats, and 6 helicopters fanned out across the northern provinces. Roads that had become rivers were crossed by inflatable rafts. Helicopters hovered low, dropping food and medicine to isolated towns cut off by landslides. President Ferdinand Marcos Jr. addressed the nation. "Every Filipino affected by this storm will not stand alone. We rebuild together." In Batanes and Cagayan, engineers worked through the night restoring power to hospitals and water stations. Churches opened their doors to hundreds seeking refuge. Teenagers helped sweep mud from classrooms. Fishermen turned their damaged boats into makeshift ferries to deliver supplies. Social media networks became lifelines, posting coordinates of stranded families and coordinating donations.
Quezon City. Ayan, kita yan. Binaha. Grabe.
Hiroshi Tanaka could one day save millions. For every loss there was a lesson, and for every scar, a story. Ramil had stripped the land bare, but it also revealed something unshakable: the resilience of a people who refused to surrender to the sea. When daylight returned to northern Luzon, the devastation of Super Typhoon Ramil came into focus. Roads had become rivers of mud. Power poles lay scattered like matchsticks. The air smelled of salt soil and silence. But among the ruins, people began to move again, sweeping, salvaging, rebuilding. What had looked like the end now became a beginning. Farmers helped clear debris from neighbors' fields. Students returned to schools that now served as shelters. Soldiers and civilians shared food under broken roofs. Across radio stations, one phrase echoed again and again: "We survived, and we will rebuild." Scientists, meanwhile, warned that Ramil was not an isolated event, but a symptom of a changing world. Ocean temperatures are rising, and storms are growing stronger, faster, and more unpredictable. The Philippines, sitting at the crossroads of the Pacific, faces the front line of a global pattern. What we learn from this storm, said climate scientist Dr. So, as the tide recedes and the sky clears once more, let this story serve as a call to awareness, to unity, to action. Like, share, and subscribe to stay informed. Stay ready, and never underestimate the power of nature or the strength of those who survive it. As the sun rose over the battered coast, the silence left by Super Typhoon Ramil was almost sacred. The storm had passed, but its echoes lingered in the flooded streets, the broken rooftops, the faces of those who endured it. From the air, northern Luzon looked like a painting washed in gray rivers out of their banks, roads erased, and yet life moving again. Neighbors shared breakfast cooked over makeshift fires. Children played in puddles that had once been waves. The rebuilding had already begun, one nail, one hand, one heart at a time. But Ramil's legacy isn't only written in destruction, it's a warning carved into the landscape. A reminder that storms are growing stronger and that resilience must grow stronger too. The world's climate is shifting, and with it, the future of every coastal community. We can't control the wind, the narrator reflects, but we can decide how we face it.